So glad you're here, or if you're not here, that you're watching this live. Um, I seem to have lost some of my notes here. We came up with this idea of having a live together and collaborating because I think our work intersects in a very interesting place and way, and think that it could lend itself to a good conversation. I guess let's just start by introducing ourselves. My name is Andrea, and I am a parenting coach. I was a teacher for many years, and I pivoted into parent coaching about 5 years ago, and I started Parenting Vistas, where I work with individuals, couples, and groups, and try to help people understand their children's behavior and power struggles and any other parenting challenges. Together with your family values, we create a personalized roadmap to help add a little fun into parenting, and always with intention and always focusing on lasting connection. And I always am trying to help parents look at today's hard moments while remembering that we're creating a relationship that's going to last a lifetime, and one that we want our kids to choose as adults.
Okay, and I never thought to ask, do people book with you through a website and then join in on those meetings virtually, or do you meet with them in person mostly?
Virtual. I do it virtually. I have a booking app, a calendar app on my website, and they book that way.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and I am Callie. I'm a mom of 4. I do homeschooling and gardening and just trying really hard to heal from years of emotional trauma. That's my pastime. Trying really hard not to pass things down that don't need to be passed down. I started my page on Instagram to share some of my story and to help people of all ages heal from generational trauma or cycles. By hopefully, honestly, self-reflecting, confronting hard truths about their difficult relationships, releasing that inherited shame that we all seem to come by so honestly, but we don't need to keep carrying it, and then finding ways to take responsibility for our own individual parts of the painful patterns that we're experiencing. And I think there's just so much healing and freedom that comes from being able to honestly take a look at what we're dealing with and confront it instead of avoiding it, and then take it by the shoulders and say, I see you, we're going to do something to fix this together. We don't have to be so afraid of facing it, even though it hurts sometimes. It always works out better when we actually heal from it instead of just avoiding the hard things. So
yeah, you try and avoid it and it comes back, right?
With a vengeance. Bigger. Yeah, every time. Yeah.
Well, I love your content is heartfelt. I think your page is it's not entertaining. I don't want to say it's entertaining.
That's fine.
But your delivery is entertaining. And yes, and your content is everything. It's everything that informs what I do. But anyway, we're going to get into it now. So we met on Instagram. We met through Instagram, and your page is about facing difficult family patterns, dysfunction, and estrangement. And mine is about connection and the parenting really for that relationship, the longevity of that relationship. And like I said, I'm really excited about sort of the nexus of where our two focuses meet. So when a child is having a hard time, the grown-ups in their life, the way that the grown-ups in their life can handle it can turn into a story that a child grows up telling themselves, or a belief that they carry with them into adulthood, and it becomes sort of their label or their identity. What to you does like no child is a bad child actually mean?
I mean, I feel like as a parent now, I can see that none of the kids that I have, I would ever want to just think, well, that's just a really bad kid. That kid just came real wrong. I think that they came also wonderful. They're children, and they're going to have childish behaviors because they're children. But they're not inherently bad. None of us are inherently bad. Our behaviors and our circumstances kind of shape how we end up being viewed by society and by our families, but I was labeled the hard kid, right? The difficult one. And a lot of therapy later, I have had to finally realize there were behaviors of mine that were difficult for my parents to deal with. Absolutely. I wasn't having a great time either. It was hard for me to deal with a lot of it too. But it wasn't because I was bad. It was because I was a human with difficulties. I was a child with developmentally appropriate behaviors, and I just needed support. And instead of being labeled as hard or a monster or broken, it would have helped a lot to be able to be seen as someone good who just needed more help.
I mean, as a child who's having a challenging behavior, I mean, it's really about the child needing to learn, right? Like,
Yeah.
to be in the world because they're just new.
Yeah. First time. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I see things online all the time about, well, it's your parents' first time on the planet too. And I'm like, yes, and I can hold a lot of space for that. But also, they've had a little bit more time on the planet than the child who has no idea what's going on.
Right.
So we should hopefully be able to be the guide for that child. And if the way we're guiding them is by telling them that they're bad, that's not going to set them up for, for success. They're going to have to untangle that,
And that takes a long time.
It does.
I mean, I think I never heard that actually, that it's also your parents' first time on the planet. But yeah, I agree with you. I think, as adults, you have the ability to reflect and learn things. You kind of come with a bit more knowledge, even though, I know there are no perfect parents and everybody makes mistakes. I think that, just like with children, like we hope that the adults learn from those mistakes, right? Because I don't know, what do we do if we don't have learning? And so even if you do make mistakes, I think that one of the things kids learn so much about and learn so much from is how we repair or apologize and move on, how we reflect on these experiences. Yeah.
Makes such a huge difference. I mean, without the repair aspect of it, the kid ends up absorbing whatever the problem was and thinking it was their fault entirely, thinking that they deserved whatever reaction they got from their parent, or thinking that they have been able to just be better. They beat themselves up, shame themselves until like, oh, maybe I can be better by being the way my parent wants me to be. Maybe I can be better and then not upset them. It just, they absorb it.
Right. And then they end up thinking like, oh, I'm not right. I'm not enough. All these other things of like, if I could just be X, Y, Z, but really we can't change who we are. And we just have to like accept it.
Keep learning. Yeah.
Learn to work with it. Yeah.
For sure. So as a parent coach, is it a coach or therapist?
Coach.
Okay. I realized I wasn't positive I was saying the right thing. Why do children behave in ways that are so challenging, or how do you see these parents come to you and ask you, like, what are the parents bringing to you when they're showing up asking for your help?
I mean, a lot of times they do come to me with a challenging behavior, and I just think of the word as challenging as it's subjective, right? So when I'm working with a family and they bring to me this challenging behavior, I do always start with, let's look at their brain development and where they are developmentally. And I try to add some normalization to certain behaviors because a lot of times they're just typical behaviors. Well, they may be, and I don't yes, they're inconvenient. You want to get to the doctor's appointment on time and your child is on the floor having a tantrum. That's inconvenient. That's annoying. That might be frustrating. And, you know,
Yeah. It
so
might be developmentally appropriate. Yeah.
it might be. And, what else is going on? So I often start by looking at these behaviors through a developmental lens and try and move away from the label of like challenging, or like we've talked about the labels of bad, or, whatever the label is. So like if you ask your kid to put their shoes on because it's time to go and you want to get somewhere on time, they're in the middle of they're in the middle of playing and they just say, no, I'm not doing it. Or they just ignore you, right? And then you respond with, I need you to listen. It's time to go. And then you're frustrated. You're frustrated here. They're starting to get frustrated. And now the expectation of the parent is that the child should just listen because kids listen to their parents. And then you start to tell yourself a story about they're being disrespectful. And then you get really frustrated and really triggered. And then you start to threaten them because that's sort of the only tool you have available to you in that moment. Mm-hmm. And you say something like, if you don't put your shoes on, then there's no play date after school, which is totally like not related. And then, so like now you're frustrated and saying things that make no sense. They're getting totally in a spiral and everyone's in a big stress response and spiraling together. So let's say then they throw a block because they're that mad. So that, yes, those behaviors, all of that is difficult and maybe challenging, but I always try to shift parents from looking at it through that, but we go through the lens of development and then communication. What is this behavior telling me? Because really what might look to a parent as a defiant behavior could just be a child struggling with trying to communicate something to you that they don't yet have the words for. Yeah. And when they're in that stress response, they don't have access to the thinking part of their brain that's able to say, hey, mom, I'm finishing up my building and then I'll put my shoes on. They just can't do that.
Yeah. They don't even know that that's what's going on for them. Yeah.
Exactly. So when, we call that challenging behavior, if we're calling it challenging behavior, and we meet that challenging behavior with another challenging behavior, control, we're just going to create a big power struggle.
Yeah, which helps no one. It helps us get
exactly. So if we can just shift. So I always help parents try to get curious about behavior and ask themselves, instead of seeing it from a judgment lens, to try and a curiosity place of like, what can it be telling me? So the shift is my child is being challenging to they're communicating something that maybe I can actually help with.
Which I love, because especially as an adult who then finally learned how to use her words, I was still never met with curiosity. So it's cool that they can practice now when their children are young and they have that ability to kind of, we have a lot more influence over our children and their learning and their behavior when they're younger. As they get older, you're not in charge of teaching them anymore quite as much, right? So it's cool that they get to practice this. Yeah. Really quick, I want to ask, I realized I had something plugged into my phone. Has my speaker been working fine?
Yeah.
You've been able to hear me? Okay.
I hear you great. All good.
Okay. I hope it's been all right.
Yeah. So what I was saying, so like when we can get curious about behavior instead of judging it, then we're able to see the child beyond the behavior, right? We're not seeing it as a mad kid, or, we're not labeling them.
Yeah.
So how, I'm asking you, how do we separate what a child does from who they are?
Well, I think just exactly what you're saying, being able to see that they're inherent, if we could believe, I love, what is it, Dr. Becky, who says the good insight. If we can see that they're inherently good and that they're just behaving in a way that may seem challenging to us, but that's the only way they know how to behave in that moment, then we can step back and say, maybe we haven't taught them how to behave any other way. They don't maybe have the skills to behave any other way. Maybe they're dysregulated in a way that makes it feel challenging to us, but that doesn't need to shape who they are. They just need new skills. They're showing us exactly what they know how to do. I'm curious too, I hope this doesn't derail anything, but when a parent comes and says this is challenging, do you think often they're feeling upset in the moment that their child is misbehaving because they're afraid that they failed as a parent to teach them anything else? Does that make sense? Like, I think when my kids are misbehaving, I feel a lot of maybe guilt or shame that I didn't teach them anything else yet. And then I get stressed. I'm like, well, you should just already know it because surely I've taught you, so then I get defensive of my own parenting instead of realizing, wait, no, there's something that I can just improve on. I can show them instead of yelling at them about it. I can just show them, hey, this is what we're going to do next time because this is how people behave. Instead of screaming at your siblings, you can, instead of owning that, I think do a lot of people get stuck in like the shame of it and the fear of failing as a parent?
I think sometimes one sort of thing I say sometimes is you have to take it's not about you, right? You have to take your ego out of it. And the beautiful thing in parenting and why it's amazing kids are so resilient, and they are resilient, we have to encourage that resiliency, is that you get a do-over, right? So like if your kid does something and you have that reaction like, oh, they should have known that, or whatever.
Failed as a parent, I should have taught them, but then instead you turn it onto them and say, well, you should have known better.
So then it's a conversation that you can have with your child, like, hey, I realized that I sort of expected that this was something you knew, and I realized you didn't. So I'd like to just tell you, because then if we come at it with like, you should have known that already, then we're transferring our shame onto them, right?
Yeah.
But I think, and I do like, I think sometimes we forget that we can talk to our kids as people and just say things, the way you would say it to maybe a friend or your spouse or your partner or whoever. Just talk to them and tell them about your mistakes, because we want them to grow up knowing that being real is fine. That's it.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. So.
No, I love that. That's such a good distinction, because the behavior doesn't mean that the child is suddenly a dummy or a bad kid, or it just might mean that they have something to learn, and we don't have to feel like a failure for not having taught them that yet. It's just showing us exactly where we have an opportunity to improve, which is kind of a beautiful thing to get to do together.
Right. And I want to say one more thing is that one of the things that I sort of focus on a lot is just adding intentionality into the parenting. And so exactly what you're saying is like, if you have that feeling of, hey, this is one of those things that I feel like I should have done, and oh, I messed up and blah, blah, blah. It's just a pause, take a break, and then you'll work through your own stuff, and then you'll have the conversation with them. But I think when you can add some intentionality, it allows you to just sort of see it from above.
That's a really good. A quick example of all of this is I started having my kids load the dishwasher. They've been unloading it for a long time, but now I'm like, all right, let's next step. And I just said, okay, start loading it. And they started loading the bowls upright, which isn't going to work. And so if I come to them and I said, I think at one point I looked at it and I thought, that's ridiculous. Why would they have done that? But then I realized I never taught them how.
That's right.
They don't know how the dishwasher works, right? So I had to go say, hey, do you know how the dishwasher works? Like, have I ever taught you how to load the dishwasher? And they're like, no. Okay, let's talk about it. This is where things go so that the water, So instead of just being like, hey, dummy, the water should, the bowls go this way. Well, why would they know that? No one taught them.
Why would they know that? Right, like even where the water comes from, right? Like, who knows?
They have no idea. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious, what's the difference to you between holding a kid accountable and then making them feel like they're the problem? Because we are still responsible for our own behaviors. Even as parents, we're more responsible for the things that they can learn and understand in, young childhood as we're supposed to be responsible, as we're supposed to be teaching them. How do we also teach them the accountability piece where we do affect people around us and we do have to take responsibility for our own actions without making them feel like they're bad?
Right. Well, always taking shame out of the equation, right? I mean, they may feel shame, but we do need to contribute to it. I think it's always important to teach kids that I don't even love the word mistakes. I just think everything is kind of like a learning process. And, like we were saying before, they're not expected to know everything and how to do everything. And that just by taking the shame out allows them to own up to it and then, make amends for any mistakes that they make. So that might look like the behavior is not okay. It's not, but you're separating the behavior and the child, right? So the behavior wasn't okay. And I know that you're able to make this right.
That's cool.
Is there's something wrong with you. You always do this. Like with the dishwasher, let's use that. Like, how did you not know that? Like, how could you not think that? Come on, you never think about anything logically, like whatever, right?
Yeah.
That could have been, there are parents that would be like, you're so stupid. I mean, I don't even want to say because it sounds so sad, but like that, I mean, we're not talking about behavior, but just that, those are two different ways that you can approach that of like, hey, you know what? I realized I never showed you how this works. Let me enlighten you. So this is what taking accountability would look like if, behavior of like hitting your sibling. So you hit your brother. Hey, we have a rule. I'm just reminding you of no hitting. No, our rule in our house was no hitting, no hurting. Because you're not just hurting your body, you hurt your feelings, you hurt your, So let's, like, if you need to take a break, let's take a break. And then we're going to come back together and figure out what happened. And we're going to talk about how you can repair it. And I personally don't love just a blanket like, oh, you hit your brother, say sorry. Because what does that mean to them? They hit them because they were mad and they definitely got something out of doing it or whatever reason they hit them.
Yeah.
So I think it deserves to be unpacked a little bit so that learning can come from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or again, like you hit your brother. You always do this. You're so mean. You're such a bad, like every time you get mad, you hit. Why do you do that? That sort of that becomes the label and the identity piece. Or something like I asked you to clean up before you started playing with something else. Why don't would it be helpful if I worked with you on this, cleaning this up? As opposed to like, you're so irresponsible. I told you, you never listen, that kind of stuff. And that's the difference, like you were saying with Dr. Becky, like coming at it from a place of they're good inside. They are good people. They just don't know. And anyway, so what's important in these things, and I think sometimes that gets missed, is that we're still holding the boundary. We're still holding them accountable. And we're separating the child from their behavior. So the difference is like you made a choice that we need to talk about versus you're just a bad kid.
Yeah. Oh, getting labeled by one bad moment.
Well, but those moments may go on and on, right? So if that becomes how you're always responded to, then that becomes your internal dialogue, your internal label, belief, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
you make a mistake and then you hear your parents' voice saying, well, you're always like this. Why can't you get it together? Yeah.
right. And then it becomes so internalized, it just becomes your voice of
Yeah.
thinking like, I'm just bad. This happens to me all the time. This is
Yeah.
what I do.
I'll never
Um,
get any better. It makes me wonder too how often people grew up with that kind of a narrative, and so that's why they're afraid of taking accountability. Because accountability is actually really freeing when done right and shame-free, right? When you can
Absolutely.
actually take the shame lens off and be like, "Whoa, I did that. Doesn't mean I'm bad, but I did do that, and I'll own up to that. And now here's what I'm going to do to make it right in any way I can." And that's actually so healing and so freeing. And so I'm wondering if people growing up with those kinds of narratives, hey, you made a mistake and you're terrible because you did that, that's what they think is equated to boundaries and accountability. um, if they were to own up to making that mistake, that's how they got reacted to. And
Right.
that's scary, and
Yeah.
that's shame based, and that's identity and character attack,
Right.
So they're afraid to take accountability because they don't realize that there's any other way to do it besides having it mean something bad about who they are, right?
Yeah.
Is that making
100%. And what if like we didn't have that narrative, like you're calling it, to filter those the things we do today, tomorrow, the next day through, right? So like you say something to your kid that isn't a way you normally would want to talk to them. You made a mistake. I'm sorry. I was mad. I wasn't thinking, and I didn't like how that came out. Instead of, this is because I'm that bad person, and I always do this, and I do these mistakes, and I've been really, and like beating yourself up about it. Like,
Yeah,
it just becomes that narrative through which we filter all of those future things.
I love that. Yeah. It's so interesting too, not just a blanket apology is expected from our kids now. We don't just, I guess from when we grew up, no apology was expected ever, but from our parents. But now from ourselves and from our kids, we expect an I'm sorry and what we're sorry for. We need to know what the heck we're actually feeling a little bit guilty for, not ashamed of, but guilty. And we need to know what we're going to do to make it better. And
Yeah,
that's that full accountability piece instead of what do we need to change about ourselves to make sure we're never going to make a mistake ever again
right.
and we're suddenly
That's right.
perfect. And if we're not, we're terrible. But what can we do to try and have a better behavior or a better outcome next time? How to be more considerate about the people around us.
That's right. And then if if it were to you and I was repairing with you, I might even want to ask, what can I do that's going to help you feel better?
That
Because
curiosity piece, yeah.
yeah. So I just like that piece of it too. So if we are going to separate the behavior from the child, I think it's important to ask, like we're talking about, if we don't separate the behavior from the child. So what happens when a child grows up believing that they are the bad one or the difficult one? What then?
Yeah. I mean, it does. It really just becomes your inner voice and that identity that you carry around. And then every interaction you have with a person, you believe that you are bad. You are inherently wrong, or you're going to end up hurting somebody when really it wasn't who you were that was hurting people. It was you gained that narrative based off of the reactions of the unfortunately emotionally immature adults around you. And it does affect every relationship. It makes it really hard to try and have healthy relationships, not because you're an unhealthy person. I mean, we all have our flaws, but like not because you're inherently going around trying to make relationships difficult, but because you believe about yourself that you are inherently able to have a relationship with. And so, yeah, when you get deemed like the problem or the difficult one, um, I think a lot of people probably lean into that and say, well, screw it. If you're going to see me that way anyway, let's see how difficult I can make it. And a lot of us end up with the people pleasing tendencies and the trying really hard to just not be difficult in any possible way. We don't want to upset anybody. we shove our own feelings down and try and be easy to get along with, to the point where we end up having no voice, and then we don't even have our own needs met, and then um, we get really, affected by that in our own personal lives. It becomes crushing. But when we can get out of that a little bit and get out of our own way a little bit and accept that some people are not going to understand who we are, when we can become more comfortable with being just completely misunderstood by some of the people, even if they're supposed to love us the most, then we can finally start to make room for our own feelings, find who we really are, instead of just trying to fill that role that our family always tried to fit us in, or trying really hard to avoid fitting into that role, trying really hard to not be the difficult person or being the difficult person. We can just figure out who we really are and own it, even if somebody misunderstands it,
Be confident with it, yeah. When you were talking, I was thinking about like how early this starts. It starts so early. I remember having a baby and people saying, "Is she a good baby?" And I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah, all babies are good babies. What do you mean good baby?" You know, those labels start so quickly and so young and so immediate, and then
It's true. I mean, even as people be good for your mom. Like they're always good
yeah, that's
they're
right.
always good for life. They're good,
They're
but
good.
their behavior may or may not be more challenging at times than others. But they're
Yeah.
good. What do you mean, be good for your mom? They're good.
I mean, it's all that messaging, right? That just is so kind of, um, what's the word? Like a reflex almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure it's meant very harmlessly, most of the time. It's just, it seeps in there, it starts to shape who you think you are,
That's right. Yeah.
quickly. Okay, so question for you. As the parent coach, what would you tell parents would be something that they could do this week? What's a realistic, like tangible thing that they could do this week to make a shift, regardless of their age, the age of their child,
Hmm.
to make a shift, to be the kind of parents that they want to be and that their kid would want to be with?
Yeah. Well, I think that I'm sorry, I got distracted.
You're good.
Hi, Kate. I saw someone join.
Oh, fun.
Um, I think that the number one thing is that when you are faced with the behavior that we're calling challenging, um, when you find yourself labeling it or having a reaction to it, have that be your moment to pause and to think about it and to reframe from the like this inconvenience. So we're going to move away from judgment and look at it with curiosity and say, what is this behavior telling me? So, because kids will do, they will thrive, they will grow up without these labels if they have, they don't, if their parents are willing to understand the message behind their behavior. If they feel seen instead of labeled, they'll grow into adults that feel safe, staying connected to their families, to their themselves, to their, not having to do things because of their label. More, I guess, just in tune and authentic and connected to themselves as well.
I love that. I think it's so interesting how often we do get stuck on those labels. It makes it easier sometimes for our brain to just categorize things and move on. But when we stick so hard to those labels that our kids get stuck in them, and we don't allow them to show us really the full range of who they are or their growth, then yeah, it's really a hindrance to who they can become. It's it makes it really hard to try and break free of those labels. And
It
so it's
does.
easier if we don't label them in the first place.
Right. And I know you have 4 kids, and I imagine they each have very different personalities.
Me
And
too.
and with those different personalities, you are it's like a mirror for you, right? Like, what do I have to learn in order to like support this child? And
Mhm.
because what we're doing is we're really, when we raise kids, we're helping them be in the world. We're teaching them how to be in the world, right? And and you know, they're all coming with their own stuff. So it that's our work. That's the
Yeah.
parent's work.
It's interesting too, because if we are so convinced that we have to use labels, why don't we at least make them positive and helpful? Like, could we just at least, if I have a kid who loves to scream, she doesn't love screaming, but she screams really, really easily at things. And instead of seeing her as just somebody who's really angry, why don't I see her as somebody who's just really good at knowing what she wants and standing up for herself,
Yeah, and use really good with using her voice.
Yes, yes. And so then that can be a strength. And eventually she will learn you can't scream at all the things, at all the
Right.
people, at all the
People
times.
want to hear
But
you.
right now being able to use that, label, if you have to have a label, as somebody who's really good at standing up for herself, and let her grow into that in a positive way and show her a society appropriate way to deal with that, instead of just teaching her, hey, you shouldn't be speaking, you're being too loud, you're being too crazy, being too angry, being, anything else that would maybe help shove part of who she is down in a bad way, help her grow it in a positive way.
Well, and that's exactly right, right? I mean, that's the role of a parent, is to take their gifts and help them learn how to use them in social, I don't know, I'm like thinking that's not the right way to say it, but like in a socially acceptable way. Um, so anyway,
So
well, I really appreciate this conversation, and I realized there was no ending here. I really appreciate this conversation, and I I just feel like I could talk to you so much, and
fun to chat with you.
I feel like you're a wealth of information, and I just feel so strongly that you are you are forging a new path
Oh,
for your
well,
family.
that's so nice of you. Thank you for putting a positive narrative for me to spin around in my head instead of all the ones that I've got going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know you have shared a quote that has been really driving a lot of what this conversation is kind of about. Do you have that and want to share? I think I might have it.
It's so funny, I wrote it down. The goal isn't just raising kids that we want to be around, it's becoming parents that they want to be around too.
Yes.
And that
Oh, so
is
great.
what informs kind of all my work with parents, is, like I said in the beginning, of just right now, I know right now I don't deny there are challenges. I know it's hard, and you know, you're helping your child, supporting your child is not the only thing that you're doing today. You have a million other things to do, and taking care of yourself. And I totally get that, and I've been there, and I just, the thing that always informs sort of my path is knowing that in 20 years, I want my kids to want to come for dinner. And
Yeah.
and I mean, they're there now, and they do want to be here for dinner. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, that's a good start. Yeah. And I know, like, the things that we're talking about aren't going to make any family estrangement proof, right? But I mean, I can sure as heck say if there was any amount of willingness to see the good in who I am, from birth till now, and willingness to meet me with curiosity, hear what I had to say, understand why I felt the way I felt, believe me when I said I felt a certain way, um, and be able to expand whatever that label is that they had for me. I would probably still have a relationship with my parents, and I hope that one day that can change. But the change doesn't come from the child. The change does really have to come from the parents and that mindset and that structure that they have built for the family, the roles that they put everybody in. There's only so much a child, I mean, now I'm an adult, so I have a lot more responsibility and things, but there's only so much a child can do. So if a parent is saying, hey, my child is so difficult, it's just so important to change that and be like, hey, these behaviors are really difficult for me. I would love to know what I can do, instead of expecting the child to be the one to change everything. See what you can do, and then I can guarantee the child will feel a lot better when you're teaching them positive behaviors intentionally and meeting them with the curiosity that they deserve, and their behavior would probably much more quickly change when it's when they're met with compassion instead of shame. So
absolutely.
yeah.
I love
Thank
that.
you so much for talking with me.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to end this, and then I want to keep talking now.
Right, I know. Thank you. And thank you for teaching me how to say your name correctly. I'm so sorry.
Of course. All right. I'll talk to you soon, Callie. Take care.